Hello, children. In this chapter of Changing Cultural Traditions, we've been looking at how the world had been changing in Europe. And before this chapter, we had also seen in the chapter of the three orders how it had been extremely important, how man has been, or rather, the European society had been moving from a hunting gathering society to a society which was now about arts, literature, architecture, science, medicine, astrology, astronomy, mathematics. So a whole new world had opened up where the people were doing so much apart from just being engaged in agriculture. Okay, so look at this topic of science and philosophy, the Arabs' contribution. Much of the writings of the Greeks and Romans had been familiar to monks and clergymen through the Middle Ages, but they had not made these widely known. In the 14th century, many scholars began to read translated works of Greek masters like Plato and Aristotle. For this, they were indebted not to their own scholars, but to the Arab translators who had carefully preserved and translated ancient manuscripts. Plato was Aflatun and Aristotle, Aristu in Arabic. Students, this is something which is very unique, this or rather which was very unique about the Arabic scholars, because for some reason, they were very kind of keen about, they were very inquisitive and keen about knowing about the masterpieces of different cultures, what were the greatest achievements of different cultures, whether it came to science, it came to arts, it came to religion, theology, everything, because it was not just that the Arab scholars were into translation of the great Greek and the Roman works, but the Arab scholars were also very much into the translation of the Indian masters, masterful works, whether it was science, whether it was mathematics, it was medicine, it was Ramayana, it was Upanishads, it was Mahabharata, it was Puran. They were they were extremely keen about translating all of them into their respective languages, that was Arabic, and to try and understand what these great cultures and the civilizations were about. So it was the similar practice that was adopted by them when they were translating the Greek and the Roman works. Now, while some European scholars read Greek in Arabic translation, the Greeks translated works of Arabic and Persian scholars for further transmission to other Europeans. These were works on natural science, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and chemistry. Ptolemy's Almagest, a work on astronomy, written in Greek before 140 years, that is, after death, and later translated into Arabic, carries the Arabic definite article al, which brings out the Arabic connection among the Muslim writers who were regarded as men of wisdom in the Italian world, where Ibn Sina, the European spelling of these individuals' names made later generations think they were Europeans. An Arab physician and philosopher of Bukhara, that is in Central Asia, and Al Razi, that is Razi's author of the medical encyclopedia, Ibn Rushd, and that is Averroes in Latin, an Arabic philosopher of Spain, tried to resolve the tension between philosophical knowledge, that is, philosoph, and religious beliefs. His method was adopted by Christian thinkers. Humanists reached out to people in a variety of ways, though the curricula in universities continued to be dominated by law, medicine, and theology. Theology is students essentially the study of religions. Humanist subjects slowly began to be introduced in schools, not just in Italy, but in the other European countries as well. Um, we take the topic of artists and realism. Formal education was not the only way through which humanists shaped the minds of their age. Art, architecture, and books were wonderfully effective in transmitting humanist ideas. Artists were inspired by studying works of the past. The material remains of Roman culture were sought with as much excitement as ancient texts 1,000 years after the fall of Rome. Fragments of art were discovered in the ruins of ancient Rome and other deserted cities. Their admiration for the figures of perfectly proportioned men and women sculpted so many centuries ago made Italian sculptors want to continue that tradition. In 1614, Donatello broke new record with his lifelike statues. Don't you remember we had discussed this probably in my I think the last video or maybe a video before that, whereby we discussed that uh, after this, the Roman and the Greek civilization was in ruins. The new generation, that is from 13th, 14th, 15th century, the new generation of these Europeans, they were rediscovering the lost glory of their forefathers, whether it was the Greek civilization or the Roman civilization. Okay, sorry, of their forefathers, and they were again fascinated by their achievements, because for the last 400, 500 years and their civilization, these after the fall of the Roman Empire, and again the Holy Roman Empire later, all was lost, and Islam had been born, and the Europeans had almost gone into a kind of depression and a hibernation of sorts, because their achievements were absolutely none. Okay, because it was, in at least in their part of the world, of course, Indian civilization, we were prospering, we were producing great works of medicine and astrology and astronomy and spiritualism and science. All of that was happening in India, but in the Mediterranean world, in the European continent, not much was happening, because everything now was about Islam, because Islam was spreading, and it was all happening at the expense of religions like Christianity and the other religions, which were local faith systems. So definitely Europeans didn't have anything to feel proud about. But then after around 13th, 14th century and 15th century, there was a revival of everything that once made Europe great, and art was definitely one of them. Since all these these sculptures and these paintings, not much is mentioned here, at least in this chapter, but I wish we were in class and I could have shown you certain things and explained it to you. Now, all these things, that is of the Renaissance period, they are masterpieces. Okay, and they sell, and they are worth, either they are priceless, or if you actually want to buy them, they would cost you not just millions of dollars but hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay, they are actually priceless. So that is how important they are. We can just study them. It's very difficult to own them. Now, formal education was not the only way through which humanists shaped the mind of their age. Art, architecture, and books were wonderfully effective in transmitting humanist ideas. But students, this line says it all, by Albrecht Dürer. Art is embedded in nature. He who can extract it has it. Okay, so that tells you the extent of the extent of how fanatically devoted these people were to their art, you know because that is what the society was then at point in time. Masterpieces were being created all around. The people, the brains, the best of the brains, geniuses were being born left, right. Every second home was giving birth to a genius at that point in time. Okay, and this particular image, students, that is the Pieta by Michelangelo, depicts Mary holding the body of Jesus. This is one of the most famous, sculptures of all time. Okay, Mother Mary holding the dead body of Jesus Christ. Artists were inspired by studying works of the past. The material remains of Roman culture were sought with much excitement as ancient texts, as we just studied. Artists' concern to be accurate was helped by the work of scientists. To study bone structures, artists went to the laboratories of medical schools. Andreas Vesalius, a Belgian and a professor of medicine at the University of Padua. Guys, Padua is in Italy, though he was a Belgian, but professor of medicine at the University of Padua. It is in Italy. It's very close to Venice, actually, and was the first to dissect the human body. This was the beginning of modern physiology, because before that period in time, students, it was very difficult to understand the human anatomy and what was inside the human body. What was liver? Where was liver? How we used to breathe, where what was the function of lungs, everything, heart, diaphragm, you name it, intestine, stomach, all of that was unknown, because who would actually tear the human body apart, whether it once the body died, because the church would be extremely critical of those practices. You would be considered as witch or some kind of a sorcerer who was kind of tampering with the dead remains of a human being. You could dare not do it. You would be banished. You never know. Some fanatics could even kill you, and it was very difficult because the church would be controlling it, and you would literally be considered a witch who should be burnt alive, something like that. Okay, so it was actually when for the first time it happened in 16th century. Today it is very, very obvious that you have the dead bodies are being torn apart, and you are doing postmortems, you are using your knives, blades all the time, so there's nothing unusual about it. But 500 years ago, you could be sentenced to death by in certain parts of Europe, and the clergy would be really after your blood and life. So it was when it happened for the first time in the University of Padua. It was a landmark event, because that helped to understand what exactly human body was from inside. The bones, the structure of the bones, everything, the eyes, the brains, the skull, everything. And strengths you have to understand. And even when it was just kind of give you a bit of an idea, even when it was achieved for the first time in the 15th and 16th century, that is definitely 16th century here, in particularly in the case of Andreas Vesalius. But you have to understand that even till 18th century in Europe, it was considered to be a taboo. The church was still very critical about doctors who wanted to request who wanted to request and who wanted to operate and who wanted to do all that research on the dead bodies, because for the church it was definitely you were disrespecting that person who had been gone. And so it was extremely difficult to actually for these medical colleges and these universities to get hold of a human body, because as you can understand, it takes a lifetime of work to understand what actually happens inside the human body, how it works, how it operates. You can ask any surgeon, even in today's world, and in spite of all the great advancement in medical technology, he would still say, "Arey yaar, main kuch nahi janta, I'm still studying." Okay, so you can understand. We shall continue. Thank you.